pretty soon, you've really got a very powerful person beginning to manifest. I don't know whether you see these people. In my psychoanalytic practice, I see them a lot. They have everything. Many of them beauty, wealth, power, everything you could want. Everything you could want. And the old peoples of the earth have always understood this begins, the more power that begins to be captured in that cup, the more dangerous a man becomes.
Yo, when I was younger, I picked up a book from the online store, Amazon, called The King Warrior Magician Lover. Here it is. Written by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. It was this interesting little book. I'd never really read anything like it before. Psychoanalysis in and of itself is a very, I think, controversial field. All those guys, Jung, Freud, Adler, they all had very interesting ideas on how the mind works. Today aren't really that keen on, but there's this one guy, he wrote it about it in a way that really was interesting to me. Robert Moore, his life was honestly as interesting as his works, and his death was even more interesting. So just relax, get cozy. Let me tell you about him. Robert Louis Moore was born 1942 in Arkansas to Golden Franklin Moore Sr. and Margaret the Priest Moore. When he was younger, it was very clear from an early age that he was pretty gifted. But as you know how it is with most gifted kids, he was a little bit awkward and didn't really know left from right socially. He had trouble with this until his older brother, Golden Franklin Moore Jr., took him under his wing, so to speak. What that actually means, I don't really know, but it worked apparently, because from then on, by all of reports of his life, he turns really into like a social butterfly. Robert picked up interest in music. He started playing piano, I believe even guitar. He started getting popular with the ladies because of it. Both of his parents were educators, so he got his love of academics from them. Specifically, his interest in philosophy, I believe, stems from his father, and his interest in spirituality stems from his mother, as he would tell stories about how his dad was this brave man who stood up to the inequality of the pre-civil rights South, and how his mom would always talk to him about following the path to the kingdom of heaven and all that stuff, and it lit this fire in him for this just interest in these things. But by the time he was 18, he then had this sort of like crossroad where he had to decide whether or not he was going to focus on music, start hitting the road as a musician to make money that way, or to focus on his academics and become like a scholar, start hitting the books. Ultimately, he chose school, and for the next couple of years, he started getting degrees all across the country, working his way from Arkansas to Dallas, Texas, to Chicago. Specifically in Dallas, 1965, he meets a young professor, Frank Bacchus, who starts teaching him about Jung. And from this is this moment in his life that he recalls being so pivotal that he included it in some of his books, and he specifically thanks him for that moment. From then on, he moves then to college, University of Chicago, and he was so impressed by the professors there, that academic community, that he decided that he was just going to stay there for the rest of his life. And he did. Eventually, when he got his MA in psychology and religion, 3 years later, he started his own psychotherapy counseling business. And then he started working as an assistant professor at the Chicago Theological Seminary. And that's where he'd stay for the rest of his life. 5 years later, he gets his PhD, and he starts getting to work. He's writing books. I believe during this time is likely when he meets his wife, Margaret Shanahan, but I'll talk about her more in a little bit. Just things are looking up for Robert at this time. He's got his wife, he's starting to write books, he's starting to edit, he's got a job as an assistant professor. He eventually gets certified in Adlerian psychoanalysis and can start his own private psychoanalysis business on top of his psychotherapy business, on top of his professor gig. And he's got everything that a guy in his position would want. Books, he's going on speaking tours, talking around the country and even internationally, and everything seems to be going well. But then, actually, it's important to note that during this time, his main interest is in occultism and in the ritual of initiation, being this psychoanalytic idea of the historical importance of taking young people and putting them through some sort of initiation ritual into becoming an adult. And he believes that it's through that people develop more steadily and healthily into adults. And it's because we've sort of strayed away from that in modern age that things are sort of getting twisted up and messed up. That's why, that's his biggest, this is two biggest things, his bread and butter at the time. But then, 1987, he remembers specifically that him and his wife wanted to go on vacation. After years of having all this stuff going great, him and his wife plan a trip to trek around Asia, seeing the sights, and it's going great until they reach Mumbai, India. There they are. They're in a taxi, getting taken around the city, getting shown the sights by this taxi driver, until he pulls into an alleyway and shows them a street in which there are thousands of people that are trying to sell themselves. And he looks at them, and he's going, and he's laughing, and he's proudful. He's saying, "Look at these people. You can buy them. You can do anything you want with them." And Robert, he's going, huh? What did you just say? He does a double take. He couldn't even believe it when he first heard it. He asked him to repeat it, and with pride, he starts explaining to Robert about how that these people this is a slave market. And Robert there, he has this sort of epiphany. He describes it as an epiphany, as if someone's like sticking a red hot nail into his head. And he's just sitting there with a realization, thinking about this place that he's in, how horrid it is, of all these men, women, and children trying to sell themselves to escape the hell that they're in. And that's when he gets this realization that he needs to study evil. He needs to understand evil. He needs to understand how it is possible that men can do this. He realizes that evil is a lot closer than we think it is, and that there is a large portion of the society that is monstrous children in grown-up bodies that are capable of inflicting untold amounts of damage.
What's up, Jeffrey?
2 other things happen in this year. 1, he gets certified in Jungian psychoanalysis. And 2, him and his wife found the Institution for World Spirituality. I don't exactly know in what order these 3 events this year occurred in. You can put them in any order you really want and it would probably work. Whether or not he went to Mumbai, had this realization, and then decided to dedicate his life to Jungian psychoanalysis and assisting the world, or if he founded those things and to celebrate they went to Asia and ended up stumbling into the most atrocious evil he's ever seen in his life. Either way works. One of them's more cinematic and cool and movie-like, but it's up to you, whatever you think makes more sense, right? So, what did he learn from the experience? Well, after that, he releases 2 books of major importance. He's released a bunch of books, but the 2 that are of the most importance, the one that are most grand encompassing of his work, is these 2. King Warrior, Magician Lover, and, if I can just get it, Facing the Dragon. These 2 books encompass that feeling that he had, that epiphany he had in Mumbai, seeing that evil, in which he, in this work, Facing the Dragon, he starts describing the inner personal, grandiose superiority that all people believe that they have, and that how, without regulating it, it could lead us into the most heinous, evil actions we could think of. And through this one, he starts talking about the 4 major pillars of people's minds, their personalities, that the 4 archetypal figures that dictate our sort of actions. And so, before I continue, I'd like to talk about these, because these are how I got introduced to more. I'll start off with King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, just because this is the one I first got and because it came out before Facing the Dragon. In this book, Robert describes how in all people, he uses masculine archetypes, the inside of men, but truly he means everybody. It's not just a boys only club. And later, it's called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, but later in his life he starts describing it as Royal Warrior, Magician, Lover, because it's more like neutral. It doesn't matter. In you, there are these 4 archetypal figures. It's easier to understand if you just picture them as 4 different people, and each of them have their own role to play. Jungian psychoanalysis is based sort of in the idea of collective unconscious, that our mythological stories have these inner, you can look at it and read it and understand it and see these things that are like our inner workings. If you look at it and you see kings in stories, you can see that they're all doing the same sorts of things. Warriors, magicians, and lovers, these things, they're not just characters in stories. These are vague ideas that when you put them all together, you can see a pattern. And Jung thought that that is part of our sort of inner mental works. And Robert takes this idea and sort of puts it together in this way, in which there are these 4... I'm rambling and going in circles. The king is the man at the head of the throne. He is the man who is making the laws. He is ruling the court, settling squabbles, all these things, all in an effort to maintain order in his kingdom, not just for the benefit of himself, but for the benefit of his people. The king, their role is that they're meant to dictate what is right for the world, right for his people, to lay down the law, to be that firm hand that's shaping his kingdom. And it's not just the part of you that's, making decisions and all that. It's the part of you that is an inner peacemaker, a negotiator, you know. But whenever these archetypes get out of whack, when they're not being accessed properly, they go into like a sort of evil, dark, twisted shadow form of themselves that can either be way too active or way too passive. An active king is a tyrant. It's someone who rules in an effort to only satisfy themselves. Someone who forces impossible standards onto his people and is freaked out whenever someone tries to outdo them. People who might just look at others with disdain for even sort of like going against them. They're tyrants. Versus a passive shadow king is a weakling. It's this little like snotty-nosed guy who, if he can't be identified as a leader or in some kind of ruling king position, he feels just worthless. He feels personally attacked by it. He feels like he's being diminished because he isn't in that position. The warrior is meant to symbolize the inner part of you that wants to serve, that wants to be aggressive, that wants to do all these things. In the book, there's a big debate about whether or not the warrior archetype is intrinsically a bad thing, as there have been plenty of people who have been victims to it. Angry people who are waging war and inflicting violence on others. It's awfully horrible, right? But the problem is that you can't just get rid of the warrior. If you do that, all you're doing is repressing it and putting it on the back burner to just let it sit there and grow and become twisted up and gnarled and like a fucking malignant tumor. You can't just put it in the dark and forget about it, because then you're just making people too ill-equipped to deal with it. You have to acknowledge this inner fighting part of you. The warrior is a combatant. It's aggressive. But the only way to use that in a positive way is to have it be for some greater good. A warrior isn't just a killer. He is a soldier, someone who is serving a greater force, a greater will. Someone who's using that aggressive energy from it and turning it into something positive by using it to motivate himself to work for his family or his friends or his community, instead of using it just as a source of self-gratification. The shadow forms of the warrior is the sadist and the masochist. Someone who has way too much active warrior energy tumbling around in them is this sadistic little bug that wants to inflict harm on others, that wants to just live purely for its own pleasure, that wants to use force as a means to just get whatever it wants. And whether, that means beating on others, or if that means being like an aggressive workaholic, it's all, this stemming from the same source of having way too much active aggression that's just out of hand. On the other side, passive warrior, the masochist, it's someone who is taking that sort of aggression and just inflicting it on themselves. They don't ever feel good enough for these things that they wish for. And so they just let others beat on them, and they beat on themselves. I'm not good enough for X, Y, and Z, so it's actually a good thing that I let all my friends make fun of me and call me lame and stupid and dumb. And because I basically am lame and stupid and dumb. But no, that's just this sense of inferiority that should be channeled into something positive, but it's just too out of whack. Someone who doesn't know how great and splendorous they could be. The magician, it encompasses the part of you that wants to seek knowledge and use it to assist others. Gaining competency in these sorts of things as an advisor for others, as this person who is meant to bless others with their assistance, it's a very sacred thing. Someone who's there to assist others and to help them through their dark times with wisdom. These people have been revered throughout history, you know. The shadow form of the magician, though, is it's a trickster. It's someone who doesn't want to use it to actually assist others. Someone who gains knowledge and all these things just in an effort to benefit themselves. This grand manipulator who thinks that they're above everybody else and can use this inner knowledge they have to just get ahead. And then the passive form of the magician then is this, I believe he says, either naive, innocent one or something, in which it's this faux image of just like, you want to be the magician. You want to have all the skills, the benefits of being the magician, but you don't actually want any of the responsibilities. You want the competency, you want the reverence, you want people to look up to you in that way, but you don't actually ever want to deal with the responsibility of having to shoulder other people's burdens and assist them with that. At first, this is sort of like the easiest way to understand these archetypes, is as this sort of like this triumvirate of three forces: the ruling body making laws, the soldier in servitude, and the advisor. And they're spinning round and round, and they're working all together. Everything's fine and dandy. And that was the original idea Robert Moore had, is just these three figures. But then something happened where he believed that he needed to add a fourth, and all of a sudden here comes the lover. What's this guy's deal? What's the deal? The lover is meant to be the part of you that is connecting with the outer world. Someone who can walk down the street and actually feel connected to the place that they are around them, to look at other living beings and to feel connection, to go through sensations and experiences. That is the role of the lover. And it's something that you need in order to have this magnificent feeling towards life. Without it, you're just not connected, you're disassociated, you're just not there. You need the lover in place to be actually a part of where you are. And that's why Robert added it on at the end. The shadow form of the lover, the active one, is the addict. It's someone who is so just addicted to these sensations and experiences and connections that they can't fathom to ever like hold themselves back in order to do something that's might be more important. He tells a story about how there's a guy who he only has a couple bucks to his name and he needs to use it to buy formula for his babies, but he just spends it on art supplies instead because he just can't imagine ever actually not having access to his passion in art, even when he has certain responsibilities ahead of him that he needs to do. That is the lover in this active. Other things like being addicted to sex, to drugs, to anything else, he pins it sort of in this thing of which it's just this sort of part of you is out of whack. From there, you got the passive form of the lover. Is the passive form of the lover, I forget exactly what it's called, but the way he describes it as being this form of you that is just shut off from the world, disassociated. You just can't feel any more connection around you. In one way, he describes it as simply just being depressed, but there's also other aspects to it. Things like not having the actual responsibility of you want the connections, you want the feelings, you want the sensations, but not being able to burden the aspects of being responsible for them. You don't actually want to have relationships with people. You just want to be social with them. You just want to connect to them, but you don't actually want to put anything back in return. The lover in its passive form is this thing that just can't connect to others, or just can't properly reciprocate and deal with the things that actually come with these experiences. But when you put these four things together, the king creating the laws, the warrior serving them, the magician offering assistance and learning, and the lover actually connecting them to the outer world, if you focus on acknowledging these inner parts of you and understanding where your shortcomings are coming from, you can then actively try to fix them, to understand them, and to put them back in balance with each other, to become a more centered person. Moore believes in active imagination. He sort of describes it as like almost like a form of hypnosis. That's how I understand it. As sitting and imagining to yourself these figures in a room and trying to open a conversation with them. He talks about how like in like the end he's talking about this, about how he had this client who like the spark from his life was just gone, and when he tried to talk to it, the archetypes, that what they were telling him was that they're just tired of being overworked. They're tired of just being like overworked without any actual reward. They want to go on vacation. They want to connect with women. They want to do all these things. And this client of his really understood it. And so he decided to just go on a vacation, go on a cruise, he finds a lady, and they end up getting married. And all these things came from just trying to talk to these inner parts of him and trying to understand what they want. That's where he got the idea from. There's a couple things I didn't talk about. Robert's whole thing initially, if you remember, was about, the ritual of initiation. And he talks about it a bit in here. He talks about how there are sort of like lesser, smaller forms of the king, warrior, magician, and lover for young boys. There's boy psychology and man psychology, and you have to get initiated into becoming a man. And there are little smaller archetypes for kids that reflect different issues and different parts of your mind. If that's sort of something that you feel you'd be interested in, I promise you, it's a good read. Check it out. Good book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. Facing the Dragon. What do we got here? This book, I learned recently actually, was that the first and last chapter are actually essays written by Robert, and everything in the middle is transcripts of lectures. Oh, I forgot to mention, a lot of his lectures are publicly available on YouTube, on his website. They're pretty cool. Go and check it out. I probably played like an excerpt from one of them in the beginning of the video. The guy has like this southern drawl. He's a scholar. He's slow talking. He's trying to explain all these complex ideas. So having like this southern rural boy talking about the deep Freudian implications of the psychology of our inner selves, that type of stuff. It's always fun. It's fun to listen to. So I'll put a link in the description if you want to check him out. Facing the Dragon. And this one, sort of how I understood it from listening to his lectures, he talked about these things sort of in a way as if the king, warrior, magician, lover was almost like more of a Jungian approach to his thoughts, and this is like a more Freudian approach to his thoughts. But truly, they're both more general, universal. You don't. It's not one particular field, but this does make a bit more sense when I start explaining the specific examples he uses. Moore likened this thing inside of us as being a dragon, as being this archaic, grandiose, above it all inner part of us that believes that it can do anything and it can have anything it wants, and that we should just do everything that we want. This great inner self. That's what this book is about. Having to deal with this part of you that thinks of itself as being above the law, above society, above being human. Freud believed in the id, the ego, and the superego. The direct translation that Moore prefers is the it, the I, and the over I. The idea is that that you have this it inside of you that just wants to live freely, take what it wants, do whatever it is that it feels like doing in that moment. And then you have this over I, that is this part of you that has learned the rules of society, the rules, these high ideals, these things that matter to you. And then the I, that's like this part of you that's sitting in the middle, trying to take these two sources of wants and desires and rationalize it as actual doable things. That's the way he uses Freudian's ideas to describe his great self within idea. Adler came up with something more akin to a superiority complex. The idea that you have this inner part of you that believes in its own superiority, that its own, you have this idealized vision of yourself in your head. You have this idea of where you want to be, your goals, your aspirations, of where you should be. And whenever you feel as if you're not living up to that, it puts you in some kind of a panic. If you feel as if there is no hope at all, in any way, to reach that point that you want to be at, this vision for your future, this vision for yourself of what you think you should be like, you either become depressed or you become manic. You either believe so hardly that it's so hopeless that you just lay in bed and just think, I should just die. I'll never ever reach the place I want to be, so why even bother living? On the other hand, you have mania. Oh boy, I really have a long ways to go to get to where I need to be. Better start zooming to do everything. So that's where you could end up being. If you have this part of you, this grandiose superiority complex inside of you that believes it has this place to be. And if you don't regulate it and maintain hope, you're either going to become depressed, manic, or you're going to develop like an inferiority complex where you think, I'm just not good enough to reach the point I'm in. I'm going to hate myself forever. I'm going to constantly think I'm lesser than other people. But it's all stemming from this neurosis. The other 50% of the book is meant to be these pondering about evil, the nature of evil. Moore believed that evil is just a genuinely tangible force in the world, in our minds, in this thing that's lurking in us, that's always trying to reach us. Evil is a tangible force that is trying to get you. And what this book is trying to convey to you is that you must stay vigilant. Evil is always closer than you think it might be, and it's constantly trying to get to that dragon inside of you. If this inner grandiose part of you starts to be corrupted by this evil force, there's no telling what kind of damage that will do to your mind. The danger that it's putting you in, and the danger that's it's making you put others in. What then can you do about that sort of thing? The only option that Moore believes is not thinking that you could kill this dragon as part of you. It's not something that you can just get rid of. In the same way that you can't just get rid of the warrior, you have to learn to manage it. You have to make sure to constantly remind it that you are human and that you are going to live as a human, and constantly regulate it. The only option you have is to domesticate this draconic part of you, right? You have to learn to ride it. As while grandiosity sounds bad, and it can lead to you doing some selfish, bad things, it's also the key to motivating you to pursue your own aspirations. It's the key to leading you onto this golden path of life. That's regulating it is domesticating it, and learning to befriend it and working with it to fuel your motivation to work towards a more positive future. That is riding it. These two books, I really do love them. I like them a lot. They were very interesting to me when I was young, and I'm happy to get to talk about them now, as Mr. Moore believed that this was the most important thing to him. This was his big. These were his magnum opuses. For the rest of his life, he continued teaching. Eventually, he worked his way up to being a distinguished professor at the Chicago Seminary. This is the part where I get to talk about the final act of his life, so to speak. Sometime during his early days in Chicago, he met a woman named Margaret Shanahan. She was born in 1951 in Nebraska. Eventually, she works her way to teaching in Chicago. And eventually, she finds herself interested in Jungian psychoanalysis. She graduates from the Jung Institution, and she even, down the line, becomes part of the board of directors. She became the director of programming at the Jung Institute. Sometime during this period, she meets Robert Moore, and together they do so many great things. They found an institution together to assist other psychoanalysts, to edit books, to financially support these people, to do good. She was right there with him in the Mumbai Incident. She is this positive force in his life for a great deal of it. And he even thanked her, gave her special thanks. And some of these books of his, some of the first things you'll read is for Margaret, which is why it's so confusing of what happened. In 2012, Robert Moore retired from teaching from full-time. He still did things here and there, but full-time he wasn't teaching anymore. Eventually, he started having many strokes that led to vascular dementia. He was having trouble, his body was having trouble getting blood to his brain, and he started having dementia from it. But he was still working, he was still doing good things, until something happened. One day, the Sun releases an article. Robert Moore and Margaret Shanahan was found dead in their home from an apparent murder-suicide. They both had gunshot wounds into their heads, and the police found that Robert had shot his wife to death and then himself. Margaret's brother attempts to sue Robert's estate. He says, this guy, he is a psychologist. He should know that he was a threat to others. This is just pure criminal incompetence, and I believe my family should be paid what's due. And just from there, it's just like that. All of this great work about being a healthy man, about being a well-adjusted person, all of his colleagues, they're getting sent into a spiral. All of his friends, all of his family, all these people who loved his work and supported him, they didn't understand what happened. How did this happen? The article blamed that, and even some people that got interviewed, they blamed, well, if something like this happened, it would have absolutely had to have been some kind of problem with his dementia. Something insane occurred. But from then on, just nothing. This is part of why I wanted to make this video, was because despite Robert having been a successful author, psychologist, scholar, all these things, this topic really is only the niche of the niche. There are probably people out there who have King, Warrior, Magician, Lover and don't even know that he's dead. But I just wanted to talk about this because I recently found out that it might be possible that it was all just wrong. One day, something comes out. Robert's niece contacts with a YouTube channel. They go over the forensic reports and they try to clear Robert's name. What happened? As it turns out, there was never any gunpowder residue on Robert's hands. There was never any actual proof linking him to be the one doing the shooting. There is more evidence that implied that it was actually his wife who shot him. Crazy. If not that, there is also an implication that it might have been a third party involved who might have killed them and then pinned it on someone else. It's tragic, it's scary, it's worrisome, but it's something that clears Robert. These people who loved his work, who knew him, and were sent reeling, have this glimmer of hope that he might not have somehow tarnished his legacy right at the finish line. That's, his niece argues that probably the Chicago Police Department. We all know Chicago's got, a bunch of crime. The likelihood is that they arrive to this crime scene, they see Robert Moore and his wife, and they're dead, and they think, well, we've got 3 more places to get to, we've got quotas to meet, just say whatever is most likely to have happened. This guy probably just shot her, let's get out of here. And after it gets revealed that that's probably not the case, they can't just correct it, because then they have problems to face. So for the past years, he's just had this stain on his legacy, which is a real shame. For a man's whole life work to have been just marked by that little blotch at the end. But for now, there's just this hope, this glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel that it might just be possible that it was someone else's incompetence that led to it. And that's why I wanted to make this video, to share his ideas, and as a way to pay my respects as I internalized these things when I was young, and it's been rolling around in my head for a while. So just letting them out into the world and seeing if other people would see it, that's better than nothing. Because this topic, this is like the niche of the niche. There are people who know about his works and probably don't even know him, know that he died, know how he died, know all these things. And there are probably people who are in his inner circle that maybe don't even know about this. His whole life was dedicated to trying to assist others into becoming a greater version of themselves. So I feel that it would be such a shame for that action to be tied to him right at the end. And so I feel that it was the right thing to do, to try to share this with the others. So just to keep these things, in this like informational circulation. Robert always talked about how we should re-mythologize things more, because mythology and these folklore and these stories we tell ourselves, it's part of us, and we can learn things from them. So if you tell the story about how there was a psychologist who got killed by someone and got the blame pinned on him, maybe that'll be enough to get his works back into the spotlight. How about that? Okay. I don't know. If you're seeing this, thank you. It was the first time I've actually talked about something trying to convey actual information. Sort of, I guess, true crime type thing. But I don't know. It was a lot of fun. So, thanks. See you around. Keep those traditions alive, right? Okay. Thanks for everything, Robert. See you later.